Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea announces the details on how it's going to ease restrictions for people who've gotten vaccinated. Some rules will be relaxed even if you've gotten just your first dose. South Korea's population continued to shrink in March for a 17th month in a row. There were also fewer new marriages than in any March on record. And the head of the Financial Services Commission reassures South Korean investors that the new regulations on cryptocurrency exchanges will protect their deposits from fraud and hacking. It's 5:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. For those who get vaccinated in South Korea, there'll soon be fewer restrictions on meeting up with other people. That goes even for people who've gotten just their first dose. Seoul Kyung has the details.
Starting next month, those in South Korea who have been vaccinated will have much more freedom in their daily lives, even after their first dose. That includes loosening restrictions on gatherings with immediate family members.
Vaccinated people, even if they had just one dose, will be exempt from the restrictions on gatherings with immediate family members.
2 weeks after being vaccinated, people will be exempt from the family gathering restrictions, meaning if 2 people have been vaccinated, then a total of 10 family members can gather. From July, people who have gotten one vaccine dose will not be required to wear masks in some outdoor areas like parks and trails. They will also be exempt from restrictions on the number of attendees at some facilities, as well as at religious activities. People who have received 2 shots will be exempt from attendance limits at private meetings, restaurants, cafes, and weddings. The so-called vaccine incentives come as the government is encouraging people to get the jabs to speed up the country's inoculation process. The Prime Minister said all these incentives will be re-evaluated after the end of September, when over 70% of the population is expected to have completed the first dose of vaccinations. Seoul Kyung, Arirang News.
New cases of COVID-19 continue to occur across South Korea. There were 707 new cases reported on Wednesday. They're still concentrated in the capital region, which has about 70% of them. But elsewhere, too, there are clusters in the double and triple digits. A cluster from a hotel bar in Daegu is now linked to nearly 200 cases. At least one of those people has the more transmissible UK variant. There have been 2 more deaths, bringing the death toll to 1,940. The White House says that 50% of American adults have now been vaccinated. The goal announced by the Biden administration is to get that to 70% by July 4th. In line with that, there's a recovery in demand for travel and leisure activities. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The United States is set to reach a new milestone in its fight against COVID-19. That milestone, according to the White House, is in regards to the vaccination campaign, with 50% of all American adults having been fully vaccinated. According to White House senior COVID-19 advisor Andy Slavitt, more than 130.6 million Americans were fully vaccinated against COVID-19 as of Tuesday morning. He added that only 1% of Americans were vaccinated when President Biden entered office in January. Despite that, Slavitt appealed to Americans who remain on the fence about getting vaccinated to get the shots. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as of 6 p.m. Monday, 61.5% of American adults had received at least one shot, while 49.8% were fully vaccinated. Overall, 49.4% of U.S. population aged 12 and above have received at least one shot, while 39.3% is fully vaccinated. President Biden said earlier this month that he wanted 160 million American adults to be fully vaccinated by July 4th. With more and more Americans vaccinated, experts believe airline travel in the country will rebound quickly. Recent demand for leisure trips have brought ticket yields to 90% of 2019 levels, with expectations that autumn figures could hit or even exceed 2019 levels. In Europe, EU leaders on Tuesday agreed to donate at least 100 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to poorer countries by the end of the year. Gathering in Brussels for a two-day summit, the leaders pledged to continue efforts to increase global vaccine production capacities in order to meet global needs. The agreement comes as the EU is now seeing a steady rise in supplies. 이 승재, Arirang News.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has expressed hope for bipartisan cooperation from the National Assembly to implement the agreements reached at his recent summit with U.S. President Joe Biden. He had a luncheon meeting on Wednesday with the leaders of the 5 major political parties to discuss the outcomes of his working visit to the U.S. last week, the outcomes of which Moon said were better than expected.
국회의 초당적 협력을 기대하며 회담의 성과를 잘 살려나갈 수 있도록 정치권이 지혜를 모아주시면 감사하겠습니다. 성과를 이어나가기 위한 국회 차원의 외교적 노력에 대해 정부가 필요한 지원을 다하겠습니다.
President Moon said that South Korea and the U.S. reached a firm consensus on the need to advance the peace process on the Korean Peninsula based on past agreements. He pointed out that the Biden administration's pick of veteran diplomat Sung Kim as special envoy for North Korea amounts to a request to resume talks and expressed hope for a positive response from Pyongyang. On the allies' vaccine partnership, Moon said it reflects their commitment to overcoming COVID-19. Washington's offer to fully vaccinate South Korean troops, he said, is a meaningful gift that highlights the importance of the alliance. President Moon also said that the abolition of limits on South Korea's possession of long-range missiles demonstrates the robustness of the alliance and that it has paved the way for the development of South Korea's space industry. As for the enhancement of bilateral cooperation in the chip and battery sectors, Moon said that it's expected to create ripple effects in the Korean economy, such as an increase in exports and jobs. The new U.S. Special Envoy for North Korea, Sung Kim, has started his official duties by speaking with his Japanese counterpart about Korean Peninsula issues. The U.S. State Department tweeted Tuesday that Kim spoke with the Director General for Asian and Oceanian Affairs at Japan's Foreign Ministry, that's Takehiro Funakoshi, to reaffirm what it said are their shared commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and other important issues. On Twitter, the State Department's Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs introduced Kim as Special Representative for the DPRK, which appears to confirm his official title. South Korea's intel chief is en route to the U.S., reportedly to discuss follow-up measures to the recent South Korea-U.S. summit. Sources say National Intelligence Service Chief Park Ji-won plans to visit New York and Washington to discuss Korean Peninsula affairs with intelligence officials there. The U.S. is said to have reached out to North Korea and is now waiting for any response from the regime. A few weeks ago, Washington's intel chief, Avril Haines, met with Park during her trip to South Korea. She also met with Seoul's national security advisor and paid a courtesy call on President Moon. In March, South Korea recorded fewer than 17,000 new marriages. That's the lowest on record for the month of March. And the population has now been shrinking for 17 months in a row. Kim Jae-hee reports.
The number of couples getting hitched in South Korea in March this year dropped to its lowest level on record for the month of March. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, the number of marriages dwindled 13.4% on year to over 16,700. This is the lowest number for the month since related data was first compiled in 1981. The number of marriages in the January to March period also tumbled 17.6%, which is the steepest on-year fall since data was first compiled. The pandemic has accelerated the general trend of fewer marriages, on top of economic factors like poor job security and rising house prices.
The number of marriages has been on the decline since 2012, and the pandemic has prompted many couples to postpone their wedding plans. The number of marriages is down across all age groups.
Fewer marriages are leading to fewer pregnancies. The number of births in March sagged 0.6% on year to around 24,000, marking the lowest figure on record for the month of March. The number of deaths rose 2.9% on year to around 26,600. Overall, there were some 2,500 more deaths than births in March.
South Korea's population has been shrinking for 17 months in a row since November 2019, and the number of births has been dipping on year for 64 consecutive months since December 2015.
South Korea's total fertility rate in the first quarter dropped to 0.88, down 0.03 from the year before. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Recent data showed that Korean consumers are feeling better about the economy, but businesses apparently are not. The business sentiment among South Korean companies is flat for this month. The Bank of Korea says the index for all industries stood at 88 points, the same as April. A reading below 100 indicates that pessimists outnumber optimists. By sector, the BSI among manufacturers was unchanged at 96 points, but for non-manufacturing businesses, it edged down 1 point to 81. The business outlook for June is slightly more pessimistic. The outlook among manufacturers and non-manufacturers were both down 1 point at 97 and 81, respectively. The head of the Financial Services Commission, Eun Sung-soo, says that South Korea's new requirement that cryptocurrency exchanges register with the government will protect investors' deposits from fraud and hacking. That's what he said when asked about the regulations on Wednesday by a reporter. All South Korean crypto exchanges are required to report to the FSC's Financial Intelligence Unit starting in September. They'll also have to get the backing of a commercial bank, which will ensure more transparency. The FSC chairman, however, warned that the government cannot protect investors from the changing value of cryptocurrencies. South Korea has kicked off a week-long series of forums on climate change. This is the prelude to the upcoming summit in Seoul on partnering for green growth and the global goals, or P4G for short. At the second day's forum, speakers discussed South Korea's efforts to forge a low-carbon, eco-friendly economy, among other things. Pae-eun-ji has the details.
On the second day of the climate forum held in the run-up to the P4G summit, South Korea's finance minister said the country will utilize its strengths in the IT sector to make its manufacturing industry smarter and greener.
As for the concrete means, we plan to invest 3.8% of our GDP by 2025 in Green New Deal projects, including green infrastructure, renewable energy, and green mobility.
Under the session's theme, Green New Deal, Clean Transition to the Green Economy, he also said the government is working to establish large-scale private investments under the Korean Green New Deal project, which aims to turn the country's carbon-dependent economy into a low-carbon and eco-friendly one. He added the government is also pushing for a fair transition of industries and workers by supporting programs so they can adapt to new industries and find other employment opportunities. The session also discussed other countries' actions to tackle climate change and carbon emissions. The former Secretary General of United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, said the pandemic might be giving us a final warning, adding that it might be a, quote, blessing in disguise.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to remind you all that there is no vaccine for the climate crisis we have created.
The president of the 26th UN Climate Change Conference also stressed the importance of reducing the number of heavily polluting vehicles and ending coal power, adding that major economies should lead the way to reach net zero targets by 2050.
And to deliver on this, we have all agreed to accelerate the transition away from dirty coal capacity to an overwhelmingly decarbonized power system in the 2030s. The G7 have also committed to phasing out international fossil fuel finance, beginning with an end to all new direct government support for international coal power by the end of 2021.
Welcoming President Moon Jae-in's commitment to stop overseas funding for coal projects, he urged every country to make determined contributions that align with net zero commitments. 배은지, Arirang News.
The Green Future Week is also boosting cooperation on climate change between grassroots organizations, governments, and the private sector. Civic groups are taking part from all around the world. Han Sung-woo has more.
Civil Society, the third session of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit's Green Future Week, late on Tuesday evening, looked at how civil society can take a more active role in fighting climate change.
Themed Just and Green Recovery from Grassroots Engagement, it aims to improve the visibility of grassroots participation in the P4G initiative.
Another goal is to provide networking opportunities for civil society groups so that they can form critical partnerships with both the public and private sector. Welcoming remarks were given by Environment Minister Han Jung-hae, head of Seoul's Seodaemungu District, Moon Seok-jin, and renowned environmental activist Vandana Shiva from India.
Civil society is the heart of democracy. It is the conscience of society. It is the voice of nature. This public-public partnership is vital for a truly green transformation in which life is regenerated, democracy is deepened, environmental and climate justice is ensured, and excesses of greed and money are regulated in accordance with national and international laws.
The special session went on to feature a partners' dialogue between members of the government, civil society, and the private sector on how to achieve a more inclusive, eco-friendly economy. Among the participants was Bilbao City Council member Xavier Ochandiano from Spain, who focused on the essence of the social and solidarity economy in realizing the P4G initiative.
An alternative made up of a growing set of socio-business and socio-community initiatives which puts the economy at the service of people. An economically productive fabric that improves factors related to local human development in a balanced and global way led by localities.
The Grassroots initiative part of the session featured examples of international public-private partnerships toward a greener future, including ecotourism in Korea, soil recovery and food sovereignty through agroecology in Mexico, and France's so-called recycling ecosystem. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a 4-day trip to the Middle East. On his first day there, he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. He reiterated U.S. support for a two-state solution, and he warned Hamas against launching more attacks. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday, warned of a powerful response against any new attacks on Israel by Hamas. The remarks were made on the first day of Blinken's visit to the Middle East, which comes on the heels of 11 devastating days of violence between Israel and Hamas. Blinken stressed that a two-state solution is the only way forward.
And that will take some time. That may, I think, produce a better environment in which ultimately there's a possibility of resuming the effort to achieve a two-state solution, which we continue to believe is the only way to truly assure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state.
Blinken also vowed to rally international support to aid Gaza's reconstruction. He also stated that this should not benefit the leadership of Hamas. He then sat down with the Palestinian president in the West Bank and expressed Washington's commitment to restore ties that had been downgraded by the Trump administration.
As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas, the United States will be moving forward with the process to reopen our consulate in Jerusalem. That's an important way for our country to engage with and provide support to the Palestinian people.
While Blinken did not present an exact timeline, such remarks imply Washington's intent to bolster President Mahmoud Abbas in his rivalry with Hamas on the international stage. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
Korean movies and pop music, of course, are getting more attention than ever these days around the world. And so is Korean literature. A number of awards for Korean books lately. But as our Kim Bo-kyung reports, this wouldn't be possible without the people who translate these works into other languages.
2020 was an astonishing year for Korean literature, with many books winning global recognition. Son Won-pyong's Almond, Keum-suk Jeondri Kim's anti-war graphic novel Grass, and Kim Hee-dim's Hysteria were among the record 6 works of Korean literature that bagged major international awards last year.
Han Kang's novel The Vegetarian, Kim Young-a's Diary of a Murderer, and Kim Il-sun's poems Autobiography of Death all have won recognition overseas thanks to the sophisticated work of the unseen man and woman who translated these books.
The Literature Translation Institute of Korea has been working to get quality Korean literature translated and published worldwide. Just 10 years ago, the institute struggled to find the publishers abroad, but the persistent efforts paid off, leading to a virtuous cycle of Korean books winning awards and more overseas publishers to reach out to the institute.
For the past decade, publishers abroad got to know our institute, and they no longer passively publish Korean literature, rather ask our support to publish Korean books in their own country. I think what we have done for over 20 years, including training translators and interactions abroad, is now showing results.
She adds that the increase in the number of native translators has also contributed to such progress. More native translators are getting interested in Korean literature thanks to the broadening impact of the Korean wave. And one of the teachers at LTI Korea's Translation Academy says education offered to support native translators has also been one of the reasons why the number has gone up.
Universities are doing a great job opening Korean studies departments, and also the presence of Korean literature and Korean culture in book fairs or international events have had a great influence.
Celebrating the 25th anniversary of the establishment of the Literature Translation Institute of Korea, the special exhibition Yuck shares the history of how the institute has supported translators and helped global readers get to know more about Korean literature. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Sky watchers in South Korea and around the Pacific will be able to enjoy a special cosmic 3-for-1 deal tonight, a super blue blood moon. Half the world will see it for the first time in 3 years. A lunar eclipse, a supermoon, and a blue moon. The super blue blood moon combines a supermoon, which is a full moon at its closest to the Earth, a blue moon, which is the second full moon of the month, and a lunar eclipse, which occurs when the Earth casts a shadow over the moon. In South Korea, you can catch it best at 8:09 p.m. Korea time. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
three-finger salute. It's a message of resistance to Myanmar's military junta.